I was thinking about the trajectory of your appearances here, and I start with this a lot because it seems like it kind of paralleled what has actually happened. I remember after October 7th, one of the things we most frequently discussed was the danger that the Israeli destruction of Gaza, which the U.S. paid for and armed, could then lead to broader regional conflict. We talked about the possibility that they would then attack Hezbollah, that they could do something in Syria to destabilize Syria. And ultimately, the biggest concern was that it could then lead to what was the cherry on top of the cake for the Israelis, which was a U.S. and Israeli attack on Iran, which we now have witnessed over the last 2 weeks. So I want to begin by asking you about the pretext or the justification that was used for this clearly preemptive or preventative attack on Iran. Iran didn't attack Israel. They weren't attacking the United States. They weren't threatening to do so. And the justification we were given was that Iran had become closer than ever to developing a nuclear weapon. They were actively attempting to acquire nuclear weapons, that if they acquired them, there was a very good probability, certainly more so than any other nuclear-armed country, to use a nuclear weapon either against Israel and or the United States, and was therefore an existential threat we had to deal with immediately. What do you think of that justification, just in terms of its veracity or lack thereof?
Well, I think, first of all, Glenn, there is no evidence that the Iranians were pursuing a nuclear weapon. And I think almost all the intelligence agencies agree on that. And the IAEA, the inspectors who have been in there for a long time, watching very carefully what the what the Iranians have been doing, agree that they're not pursuing a bomb. The problem from Israel's point of view is that they are not that far away from a point where they could build the bomb. And that's in large part because the Iranians have the capability to enrich uranium, and they've enriched it up to 60%. And if you enrich uranium to 90%, you are in a position where you are producing weapons-grade uranium. So all this is to say that the Iranians are a threshold state. They're not a nuclear weapon state, and they're not pursuing nuclear weapons. But they've marched down to the 5-yard line, to put it in football terms. And they are allowed to do that as a member of the NPT. You're allowed to enrich uranium. So they're doing nothing that's illegal or nothing that is wrong according to international law. They have the right to enrich uranium up to 60%. But again, that leaves them as a threshold state. And the Israelis consider this unacceptable. And what the Israelis want to do is they want to eliminate their ability to enrich uranium completely. But that's only goal number one. Goal number two, which we should also talk about, is regime change. The Israelis are interested in more than just eliminating Iran's nuclear capability. They want to effect a regime change. Those are the two broad goals.
Yeah, that's why I called the claims about the nuclear program and the threats and fears of it a pretext, because I think ultimately the real goal, much more so than the attack on the nuclear program, which might have been part of the goal, but the real goal was and is regime change. And I want to get to that, of course, in a second. But before we do, I just want to stay on this topic a little bit. You had mentioned that Iran, under the NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, has the right, like every other state, to enrich uranium to whatever levels they want. They just can't weaponize that uranium, even if they could, and acquire a nuclear weapon. They have inspection obligations. But there was a time when Iran did have actual limitations on the extent to which they could enrich, namely when they entered into this deal in 2015 that was very painstakingly negotiated with the entire world, where Iran voluntarily accepted a limit on its ability to enrich uranium that no other country has. Namely, they wouldn't enrich uranium past 3.6 or 3.7%, the amount you need for nuclear energy, but not for a nuclear weapon. And they also agreed to far more invasive and rigorous inspections and monitoring and surveillance than they have the obligation under the NPT to provide to the IAEA as well. Do you think it's fair to say that Donald Trump's decision to unilaterally rip up that agreement and his failure, and then Joe Biden's failure over 4 years to enter into a new agreement with Iran that would also provide that same framework of monitoring and surveillance, those same limits, played a major role in how we got to this place where the Israelis perceived that a war was necessary?
Well, I think that it would have been eminently wise for the Israelis to accept the JCPOA. That's the 2015 agreement that President Obama negotiated with the Iranians. It was not a terrific deal from the Israelis' point of view. I fully understand that because it did allow Iran to continue enriching uranium. But it was the least bad alternative by far, and it was not a bad agreement. And I think, just to pick up on what you were saying, that President Biden and now President Trump would have been wise to have gone to a new variant of the JCPOA. I think the biggest problem, from my point of view, with the original JCPOA, this is the 2015 one, is that it had sunset clauses. In other words, it ran out over time. I think if they could
years,
have,
right? It wasn't like 2 years. It was 10, 15 years in the future.
yes, that's right. But 2015 was now 10 years ago.
True.
But anyway, I think that you could have put in place a new JCPOA that did not have sunset clauses, and that could have shut down this problem for a long, long time, if not once and for all. I think at the same time, what you had to do is you had to take your gun sights off the Iranians. The problem is that the Israelis and the Americans have their gun sights on Iran, which gives them a very powerful incentive to be a threshold nuclear state, which is why they want to be able to enrich all the way up to weapons grade material. But if you took away the threat and you took away the sanctions and you tried to have some sort of rapprochement with the Iranians, I think the JCPOA would work very well. And again, it's the least bad alternative, because the idea that you're going to bomb the Iranian nuclear weapons program to the point where they can't develop bombs it's delusional. It just can't be done.
Let me ask you about the kind of fear mongering, though, that did exist, was purposely propagated around the idea that Iran was getting closer to a nuclear weapon, which, as you say, they were enriching at 60%. First of all, even if you develop a nuclear weapon, you still need a delivery system in order to, drop it on the country that people say you want to drop it on, which is another pretty significant barrier to figure out how to put it on a warhead, how to put it on a missile, or how to put it in a plane. But beyond that, I think the more interesting question is, we do have a lot of nuclear states, including states like Pakistan and India and North Korea, to say nothing of the members of the Security Council. And I think we saw with the United States and North Korea, when there were tensions, we backed away, almost certainly because they are a nuclear power, and we have to take that seriously as a matter of deterrence. I think in the India-Pakistan war that broke out for a couple weeks, that got pretty intense between two countries that have deep-seated hatred and distrust for one another. There was a pretty quick end to that as well. They were very careful about the escalatory ladder because both are nuclear-armed powers. And that has been the basis of nuclear strategy since other countries besides the United States got it. It's like, look, you can use it, but we have second strike capability. We'll see it coming. We can launch before it hits. And it's mutual assured destruction, meaning if you want to use it against us, you can, but you're going to get obliterated instantly and your whole country is going to be vaporized. And that has been the reason why there's been this deterrence that has kept the peace. We got close to nuclear war with Russia in 1962, but even there, we sort of backed out, maybe by luck. But since then, I don't think there's been a lot of instances of that. So what we're being told is that, look, deterrence works even for India, Pakistan. It works for North Korea and Kim Jong-un and the society that we're told is kind of like a maniacal cult. But it won't work for Iran. Iran would use it against Israel, might use it against the United States, even though they know they would be instantly vaporized if they did, because the leaders of Iran don't really care about preserving their lives. They're actually part of an apocalyptic, end times, death-glorifying cult. And the greatest wish they have is to be martyred and to die for some sort of jihad, and therefore they're not susceptible to the same rational, pragmatic considerations or enlightened self-interest that all other countries are governed by. Based on what you know about Iran, based on what we've seen Iran do over the past couple of years, including just now, do you think there's any truth to that?
No, I think it's a myth. The Iranians have not started a war in 200 plus years. The idea that Iran is this warlike country that's run by wild and crazy leaders who are just looking for an opportunity to nuke Israel or nuke their Arab neighbors it's a ludicrous argument. The Iranians don't want to disappear from the face of the earth any more than the Israelis do. I think your point that the point you're making, Glenn, is basically that nuclear weapons are a powerful force for peace. And I think there's no question that if every state in the Middle East had nuclear weapons, it would be a more stable region. But the problem with that argument is that you cannot guarantee that they won't be used. And even if there's only a 1% or 0.5% chance that those nuclear weapons will be used, you'd prefer that Iran not have nuclear weapons. And you would certainly prefer that not every state in the region have nuclear weapons. But you can't deter, building on your rhetoric, that nuclear weapons create stability. They do, but they're not perfect. And again, the great danger is that somebody will use them. Now, with regard to the Iranians and the Israelis, if you ask me what country in the international system today is most likely to use nuclear weapons, I would say it's Israel. And I think the nightmare scenario that we have to worry about is that the Israelis believe that Iran getting nuclear weapons is an existential threat. There's no question about that. They have this view that the Iranians, if they get nuclear weapons, will use them against Israel. Well, at this point in time, it looks like the Iranians have very powerful incentives to get nuclear weapons, given what's happened over the past 12 days and even before that. And furthermore, it looks like they have the capability because we've been unable to eliminate it. So the question you want to ask yourself is, what are the Israelis likely to do if Iran actually does develop a nuclear weapon? And I think the Israelis will have a very powerful incentive to go in and take out that capability before it's realized. And the question then you have to ask yourself is, how can they do that? And it's quite clear that the only way they can do it is with nuclear weapons. And do you think the Israelis would use nuclear weapons if Iran were on the threshold of getting a bomb? I think there is a reasonably good chance that they would. So what I worry about is not the Iranians getting nuclear weapons and using them against Israel. I worry about the Israelis using nuclear weapons against Iran when Iran is in the process of acquiring a deterrent.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the idea that we're claiming and characterizing Iran as this group of people led by end times religious fanatics is so ironic, given that that kind of mentality pervades the U.S. Congress and the executive branch in terms of how they shape foreign policy and the ideological or theocratic foundations of it. They'll say that. They'll tell you that. And of course, Israel as well increasingly has a lot of people who believe that Israel has to expand well beyond what they were intended to be because of what God promised them, the covenant that God made. So there's a lot of theocratic extremism that's driving a lot of countries, and I do think Israel has demonstrated it's less limited by ethical, moral, and humanitarian limitations, or certainly legal ones, than almost any other country. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.